Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Linc'd podcast, which is obviously your place for everything Philadelphia Eagles on the Sideline Sports Network, the best sports network in the business. I have so many great shows on this network, guys, so make sure that you tune in to all the shows during the week. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Lindy. We got a lot of stuff that we got to get into tonight. The Eagles lost their first game to the Jets. The first time in franchise history losing to the Jets. Was not a good game at all. We got to talk about that. A lot of injuries going on with the team. Brian Johnson on the hot seat. Julio Jones, totally unexpected news this week, signing with the Eagles. And then to wrap things off, we're going to be joined by a special guest and friend of the show and friend of the network, John Shear, who covers the Miami Dolphins. He's going to give us a Dolphins perspective on the game. So we got a great show planned for tonight, Lindy. What's up?
Do we have to talk about the Jets game?
I know we don't want to, but it's kind of like when you got a Band-Aid. You know, you got a Band-Aid on and then it hurts when you're like slowly taking it off, and then you just got to rip that thing off. The Eagles have to rip it off, and they got to have short-term memory, and they got to move on to the next game. So let's go ahead and get started with the Jets game. It was a terrible game. I have to say I'm proud of what the defense did. The defense totally did what they were supposed to do. They pretty much shut the Jets' offense completely down. The Jets did not score a lot of points. They gave up one touchdown at the end, but that was off of the very bad interception thrown by Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, 3 interceptions in the game, 4 turnovers by the offense. They just could not get anything going against the Jets. So it was a really bad performance, and it's something that has to raise a lot of concerns when you're talking about this team and what they're trying to do. This is supposed to be a Super Bowl level team. This is supposed to be a team that has very high standards and expectations. And, you know, we've talked about the team not being consistent in certain areas, and this kind of showed in this game. So I have to say, though, the one positive that I can take away from this game is that I really liked to hear the news of the players stepping up in the locker room and taking accountability. Like, Nick Sirianni was not speaking to the team. It was Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Brandon Graham, and a lot of the notable team captains were like, look, whatever we're doing right now, this is not acceptable. This is not okay. We have a very tough stretch of games coming up, starting with the Miami Dolphins on Sunday night. And, it's not really going to get any easier. So the time to pick it up is right now. The time to get it going is right now. And, that's what great teams do. They move on from stuff. They take accountability, and they use it to make them better. So my hope is that the Eagles are going to flush this, put it behind them, and use it to make them better. Lindy, what was your thoughts on that game?
I got a whole lot. Y'all are in for it with with the material that I got for y'all, but it's common coaching practice to put the players in a situation and make them try to figure it out for themselves in a means of a lack of execution, if you will. You're given the blueprint. It's like it's like a construction site where you got the engineers and the architect. They give you the blueprint. You're supposed to build it to spec. Dimensions have to be correct. This and that and the third, and all the fabricators and the construction workers. Well, this piece is an inch short, and this one is out of square, and yada yada. I sound like I'm at work, but you get where I'm going. You get where I'm going from. There's a level of professionalism there that you have to maintain a standard for, and there was just a whole lot of things that weren't clicking at the right time, or as we have in the thumbnail of this title, did the Eagles wear a big L at the wrong time? You can arguably say that going into Kelly Green week. And then here we go with the first slide here. And I don't have a whole lot for y'all because there wasn't a whole lot to talk about, though. But to your point with the defense, they made Zach Wilson look pretty pedestrian. You take it 0 to scale of 0 to 100, QBR of a 40. It's like it's below average. It's 10 points below average. It is what it is. 186 yards on 19 of 33. He was able to distribute the ball decently well to Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, but to say something like that to the standard of Zach Wilson, is that really saying much? At the same time, I think you can ask yourself that question as well. Jalen Hurts, 45 pass attempts. That has been a massive talk of the town this week. 280 yards off of those. He still played above average with 3 interceptions and a touchdown. Take of that what you will. A.J. Brown being himself for 4 consecutive games now, setting an Eagles record, I believe, for that in consecutive weeks of over, I think it was 100 to 120 reception yards. You got to love that. But at the same time, I don't think you love the fact that Hurts was the leading. I think he was close to being the leading rusher on this team. You take account of what Boston Scott did, Kenny Gainwell, and DeAndre Swift. There wasn't a whole lot of action there, and that's cause for concern going into a game where you're going to face a high level offense in the Miami Dolphins.
Best offense in the league.
You can't afford to play from behind whatsoever. And here we go. An offense that was given so many chances. Where I have it on slide 2, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I want y'all to read this with me. Outside of knowing that the defense was unfairly put into a bind, we understand that. They gave y'all 5 sacks. They allowed only 89 rushing yards. 12 of the Jets' 20 points were field goals. Take that into account right now. 12 of the Jets' 20 performance by the defense. Goals. That's unbelievable. They were 2 of 11 on 3rd down. 1 for 4 in the red zone. And you mean to tell me offensively we couldn't muster more than 14 points? So, and it's just I can pile on. I can continue to pile on. You want me to keep going? Here we go. Team heroes of the day for the 3rd one right here. The team heroes, obviously, the Eagles defense. And for as much crap as Sean Desai has been given in the last few weeks that, the corners are playing so far off and it's a bunch of soft coverage and this, that, and the third. Listen, his defense was executing without Darius Slay, Jalen Carter, Marlon Tuipulotu, who is a nice depth piece at the defensive tackle position. He's been building himself up. Sidney Brown, the rookie that everybody has been enamored about, playing very well at the safety position. Reed Blankenship went out of that game with a ribs injury. They lost Eli Ricks, depth at corner, to a knee. Bradley Roby, who we just picked up off of the street, essentially, to try and give us some help at the slot corner position. So James Bradbury's not playing out of position. We lose him to a shoulder. So take all of that into account. And Sean Desai did a pretty darn good job, all things considered, with what his game plan was for the most part and how his players executed, facing the adversity of us having a urgent care clinic at NovaCare with the amount of players that are hurt at that point in time. So, I mean, like I said, I can go on and on and on about this game, but I love the fact of Jalen Hurts' mentality, and he has been known to say this before, that, to flush it down the toilet and move on. And he's already on to the next game. This isn't back to, and I'm not bashing on Doug Peterson and in a negative way, and I'm not going to do it to Carson Wentz either, because that horse has been dead for such a long time. They would tend to seem to sit on this longer than necessary, and sometimes it even affected them going into the next game. And they can't get out of the mud, and just a bunch of things are off. For a Jalen Hurts led football team, that's absolutely not the case. So we can trust that one of our top captains, or the captain, if you will, of all these players, you can trust that he's going to have his guys ready. And especially for Kelly Green week, they're not going to want to disappoint, because we've been waiting for these jerseys for 13 years now. They haven't worn them since week 1 of 2010. We haven't seen them. So
in the words
you better
of
believe
Jalen,
that they're going to come out swinging.
In the words of Jalen Alexander Hurts, when you take a deuce, you don't look at the deuce. You flush it and move on.
There it is.
Even though sometimes I look at mine, it's neither here nor there. You got to flush this one out and move on. So moving on to our next topic. The Eagles have been having a lot of injuries this season. The injuries have been crazy. Lane Johnson left the game last week, and we saw how much the team is different without Lane. But thankfully, the news came out that Lane is expected to play. And Slay was out for that game, and Jalen Carter was out for that game. Hopefully we can get some of these guys back. But the injuries are really piling up on the team. It's tough to see. And what we're seeing is, this team does lack depth in some areas, which explains why some of the moves have been made. They lack a lot of depth in the secondary. So the question is, what is this team going to do? Like, you're basically completely decimated at the safety position. Reed Blankenship is out for this game. And you have basically nobody back there at the safety position. You have a rookie, Sidney Brown, that has no experience playing. He's back there. And you have Terrell Edmonds, who hasn't been good. So it's going to be a problem, especially going up against a team like Miami that has a lot of fast receivers. It's a problem. So I think that the only solution to this is going to be to pick up the phone and make a trade. And you may have to part with a good, decent amount of draft capital to make something happen. But you are trying to win right now. You are trying to win a Super Bowl this year. Not next year, not the year after that, not the year after that. You're trying to win right now. So I think the only solution to this problem, especially in the secondary, you got to make a move. So I'll be interested to see, is Howie Roseman going to make a move before the trade deadline? We'll have to keep our eyes on that.
He certainly doesn't have a choice. This isn't the first time we've seen this either, where the Eagles are put in a sticky situation when it comes to the amount of players that get hurt over the course of said weeks. And, we're only going into the 7th week of this year, and we've already seen how many injuries to some of these players. And I understand how, especially the fact that a lot of people have wanted these veterans back as well. And Slay's still here. Bradbury's still here. Fletcher Cox is still here. BG is still here. Those guys have had an injury history at some point or another. And, the older you get, the harder it is to be able to sustain your body and prevent injuries when they continue to pile on. So we've seen Slay have a knee issue, but now it looks like he is ready to go. Sidney Brown has been dealing with that hamstring, trying to battle it. We've seen him in a press conference, talking about that if he's glad that he's not a doctor, because if he was, he would have played on that hamstring, because he just wants to get back out on that field. And I appreciate him for that. Tui Pelotu, he's still dealing with the triceps. Jalen Carter should be good to go from that ankle. Lane Johnson, Stonewall Johnson, man, just an unbelievable story for him, and how he always talks about mental health and everything. And I see the tweets that he posts on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and I love that about him. I loved that about Brandon Brooks when he was in our trenches with them. So, I mean, the way he battles like that is just unreal. So long as he takes care of himself, because when coming up in Lindy's lame stat, you're going to see that. But as of right now, we'll continue here. Bradley Roby, we already know he's day to day with that shoulder. Thankfully, it's not looking like it's a stinger issue like we dealt with Jordan Howard so many years ago. It's not looking like that, so it's a relief. Reed Blankenship, him and Bradley are unfortunately out. Eli Ricks, I think, is good to go after his knee, losing him in the Jets game. We already know that Avonte Maddox has gone for a year with that torn pec. And then on the plus side of things, if you want to take it as a plus, Cam Jurgens, who we know has been a massive contribution in terms of not just pass protection, but the run game as well, and how darn good he's been at that right guard spot. There was talk where we don't want this guy replacing Kelsey at center because he's just too good. He's just too good at the right guard spot. And we lose him, and then you see the impact that it makes, much like Lane Johnson. This team just isn't as good at running the football without Cam Jurgens. Thankfully, he's eligible to come back week 9. And then you got Justin Evans and Quez Watkins, where Quez can't seem to get I believe it's his hamstring as well. He can't seem to get that back on track, so he had to go on IR again. Those two are able to return week 11, but you know, we've seen the best of times and we've seen the worst of times with these injuries. And I will say that on the plus side, at least the Eagles are in a better position now than they used to be with injuries in terms of depth, because most of our key contributing players are still healthy. And, you know, that can help carry them to hopefully build up some more wins and get us back into playoffs. But most of the big impact guys, we need to maintain their health as much as possible.
Yes, if you guys are just now tuning in, we just covered injuries. Eagles have been decimated by injuries and stuff this season. Moving on to our next topic. So, Brian Johnson. This is a topic of conversation. The offensive coordinator for the Eagles. Things have not gone particularly well, especially in the red zone. The Eagles have been terrible in the red zone this season. They were phenomenal in the red zone last season. Some of that has to be on the players, but some of that has to be on the play calling. Play calling in the Jets game, not particularly good. There was no real balance. Couldn't really get the run game going. Totally abandoned the run. 45 passing attempts for Jalen Hurts. That's not something that you want to see every single week. You want to try to have a balanced attack. It gives the offense more opportunities to put points on the board. And, you know, it really hasn't gone well. And Brian Johnson is kind of showing his inexperience. So I would have to say to this question, I'm probably going to have to say no in fairness because it's his first year as a coordinator. They're not going to fire him. They're not going to let him go. They're going to stick to their guns. The better question, I think, should be, okay, Brian Johnson obviously may not be ready to be a full-time play caller due to his inexperience. So what are they going to do? Would Sirianni ever consider taking that back over? Which I think I would have to say, even though 2021 is first year, he turned it over to Shane Steichen, who's now coaching the Colts. But I would have to say, yeah, I would be more comfortable if Nick was calling the plays over Brian Johnson. But it is very concerning. And this upcoming week is going to be very telling. I want to see what kind of game plan Brian is going to put together. I'm going to want to see how he's going to attack the Miami defense, because I do think they're vulnerable in some spots. So I want to see what he can cook up, because we're with him, live or die this season. So we're gonna have to put some faith and support in him moving forward. But to answer your question, no, he is not going to be on the hot seat, and he is not going to be fired. It's not going to happen.
No, I'm on the same page as well with this, although I'd be lying if I said that it hasn't irritated me to see the level of inconsistency there is. Absolutely. And I understand that there is a lot of similarities between how the offense looked at that last year and how it looks this year. But I think one of the key differences is the fact that we seen it early, and I think it was the Vikings game last year early in the early in the year, coincidentally enough, was a good example of that. And I think there's a few other examples. I don't have last year's schedule up, but if we remember how dominant the Eagles were offensively, and you add that to how well the defense was playing at the same time, we slaughtered teams in the first half alone. But it then got to the point where we couldn't muster anything almost the entire second half, where there's some games where the Eagles are only getting 2 more field goals for the entire third and fourth quarter, but the defense was shutting them out to the point where it didn't really matter. We didn't have to score as many points to beat these teams because we also had almost as dominant of a defense in most games to take care of their job. We hold on to the ball long enough where we're not taking very many 3 and outs. The defense still gets a breather. We kind of advance the football a little far enough to punt it deep into the opponent's territory. But nonetheless, I think that's one of the biggest differences between what we're seeing this year and last year. Not to mention, and there's Lindy's lame stat, of course, but not to mention the red zone woes are another huge difference between last year and this year. Last year, I think we were in the mid 60s. We were a top 5 team in red zone percentage, and now I think we're hovering around the low 20s at about 46%. So, and then like the offensive problem right here for my lame stat, and just like the Jets game, for example, because it's clearly the biggest one, you take away the points off turnovers, and our defense only gave up 10 points against the Jets. And then without Lane Johnson, we're 13-24. So it's just a domino effect of crap that Hurts was talking about, to where, this immediately has to be flushed and move on. But like you said, and I'm on the same page with this, with the fact of this being Brian Johnson's first year as an offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he has experience at the collegiate level when he was in Florida doing the same thing for the Gators, working with Kyle Trask. He had Kyle Pitts on his offense, and he had another awesome piece over there, and it's
Kadarius Toney.
Yes, it missed me. So you take that into consideration as well, but the NFL is a completely different animal, for one, and two, we've seen kind of the same thing in 2021 where Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen are trying to figure it out. But lo and behold, let us remember here, this is Sirianni's offense. This is his offense. A lot of the designing and everything, a lot of the designing is what Nick wants. And Brian, for the most part, is there to, as it says in the name, to coordinate everything and try and help his quarterback maintain some sort of organization. I think there was I personally feel to this day still, there's a better cohesiveness. There was a better cohesiveness between Shane Steichen and Jalen Hurts. And I think we were saying this plenty of times.
A long time, and
right.
Brian hasn't.
So, I mean, we were saying this, I think, plenty of times last year as, wow, these guys, how well these guys are on the same page here. It's almost like they know exactly what to do. They're one step ahead of the defense, and it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter what they do. We're still going to score on you anyway. There was just some kind of genius level there. And don't get me wrong, some of Brian Johnson's play calls have been pretty creative. He's had some creative ones. He's had some ones where the game before the Jets game, we finally got Dallas Goedert over 100 receiving yards, and we're like, yes, come on, there's the tight end that we know. AJ Brown for how many yards that he has had in consecutive games. So I mean, I don't know, man. It's continuing to get harder to put a finger on, but the simplest way we can still put it is they're just not clicking yet. And that's the scary part. Imagine when they do click together, how dangerous this
Well,
offense can be.
they're gonna have to build that consistency. It's just not
Yeah.
there right now. So we'll
Yeah.
have to see how the rest of this season plays out. But there's a lot of room for improvement for the Eagles offense. A lot of adjustments have to be made. So gotta move on to some news that took place this week. The Eagles signed former superstar wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons. Spent some time in Tennessee and Tampa Bay, which is pretty forgettable. Julio Jones is an Eagle. My reaction to this, I understand why they did it, but I don't think it's going to work out, and I'll explain why. So obviously, Quez goes down. They want a guy that has some experience. They want a guy that, can come in and play. But I don't see how this is going to work out because Julio has not been available basically for the last 3 years. Dating back to his last season in Atlanta before he went to Tennessee, he's getting hurt every single year, not just missing like 3 or 4 games. He's missing 8, 9, 10 games almost every year since then. So I just don't think that at this point in his career and where he's at, he's going to be able to withstand playing in the NFL. I think that he will probably play a few games or even one game at that. And I think he's going to end up getting hurt, and the Eagles will still be at square one, and they'll just have to hope and pray that AJ or Smith does not get hurt, because if it happens, then the receiver core is going to be decimated as well. But the main reason I think that they like to do this is because even if Quez is healthy, you don't really trust him as a outside wide receiver. You want him in the slot. So I think the Eagles offense could be more dynamic if Julio was somehow able to hold himself up and just be decent and let AJ take care of the rest of the business and move Smith to the slot. If he moves Smith to the slot, he's going to be a lot more dynamic, I think. And Smith is very dynamic as an outside receiver too, but against these different kind of DBs that are lined up against him in the slot, I think he would be able to do a lot of damage there, kind of like we see with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and guys like that, elite receivers at the slot position. Smith could definitely do damage there too. So I understand it in theory, but based off what we know, I don't think it's going to work out.
Right. That's a fair assessment in your opinion. But I will say this. I will say this in minor defense to Quez. I think they've played him a little too much in the slot, and that's not really his game. He was built from college as an outside receiver to take the top off the defense, and he just hasn't had enough opportunities for that. And I get that we've only seen it in sporadic spurts last season. He had that deep touchdown against the Vikings, and then I think he had a touchdown against the Colts. So there is something there, but between that, and I think the overwhelming presence of just better talent around him kind of singles him out. Let's not make this as, and I seen a graphic on Twitter earlier. Let's not make this as any kind of comparison between him and Jalen Reagor. Let's not do that, please, because I seen a graphic. I seen a graphic on Twitter where it's like, oh, one dude spends 2 seasons here and the other dude spends 4 seasons, and their statistics are very similar. Come on, cut the crap. It's a first-round pick who was taken before Justin Jefferson. Yes, it has to be regurgitated for this point. It's a first-round pick versus a 6th. Come on, get over it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But yeah. I mean, for Julio Jones, I love the fact that AJ Brown's big brother figure is here. And it means an awful lot to AJ because this is the guy who he modeled his game after. The amount of time that they've spent together with the Tennessee Titans, and AJ was a big advocate. He was a big factor in the Titans trading for Julio Jones in the first place. Now, like Julio said, don't get it twisted. I'm here to dominate. You obviously have to love the attitude there, and I appreciate that from him. But let's not get this twisted either. The same people complaining about Julio Jones are the same people who complained about bringing Deshaun Jackson back in 2019. He explodes in the week, I think in the week 1 game against Washington, albeit, and unfortunately he goes down to injury. That's the biggest thing that people are afraid of with Julio Jones. But I can guarantee you that their level of contribution is not going to be the same whatsoever. You have,
I would hope not.
You have essentially 3 receivers that are above Julio right now. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are a given. Dallas Goedert is a given. And then, Olamide Zaccheaus, Oz, he can essentially be a given as well if he wasn't splitting snaps with Quez Watkins here and there. So I don't think he has even gotten on the same page with everybody offensively. So I trust that the Eagles and Sirianni and Brian Johnson, I trust that they are going to do their due diligence and making sure that a lot of what Julio does is situational. And, just think of plays like this. We know how deadly of a route runner Devontae Smith is. You throw him in the slot in quick slant situations, nobody's covering him. You put a big body in the slot and AJ Brown over the middle, nobody's covering him. He's getting his big mitts on the football. And you got Julio Jones on the outside, who is still a down the field threat because he can tower over anybody. So I mean, you limit that, and you keep it to, I don't know, 10 to 12 snaps a game. That's a pretty, you're in pretty good odds to maintain him staying healthy for the long term, especially going into the playoffs. That's just another potential weapon for you. That's low risk, high reward. I don't have a problem with it at all.
All right. Well, we'll have to see how it plays out with Julio. Julio expected to play on Sunday against Miami. Speaking of Miami, it's finally time to preview this game. Huge game. And I want to welcome to the stage special guest and my friend. We've worked together. We've covered events together. We've done shows together. John Shearer joins the party. Kirk, if you want to bring him on, feel free. John, what's up, buddy? Thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I see you wearing that Dolphins gear, man. So talk to me about the Miami Dolphins, what they've been able to do this season. One of the best offenses in the league. Tua having a MVP caliber season. So what's really working and clicking for the Dolphins right now?
So Miami's a run-first team first. First of all, let's get that out of the way. They're not a pass-first team. They're a run-first team. We saw last year the only way that they succeed this year was last year they had to go through the growing pains. They thought all they had to do was pass the ball because we got Tyreek and we got Waddle, and that ended up failing because they were one-dimensional. So this year they figured out how to be balanced. The game against Buffalo, what did they do? They didn't run the football with Raheem Mostert, and they ended up losing the game. So they got to be balanced. And one thing that Miami is, and I think they're going to do Sunday night, and they've done this to a lot of teams, is they're going to motion. And not just motion, but if you watch what they do, these are trick motions. So you think it's going one way, it goes another way, and then they pull a tight end behind Tua to block, right as they call hike, and he swings around and they pull a guard, and then they have 2 guys pulling on the right side for Mostert to do the zone run. So that's what Miami wants to do. I know Jalen Carter's an important piece of your defensive line, but the knock on him, aside from the car crash that killed 2 people, the knock on him is he's not a 3-down guy, right? So Miami's going to want to wear him down. They're not going to run straight at him. Again, they're going to run right to left, and they're going to make that defensive line chase. And then whenever they think they're going one way, they're going to go the other way. Miami wants to wear them down. And whenever they wear them down, they start to run the football. That's when they're going to throw on you. They're going to pick their spots, and that's what the Dolphins do best. And I'm not sure Philly's ready for that because they haven't seen an offense like this. Most offenses are pretty vanilla. They come straight at you, but Miami doesn't come straight at you. Everything is smoke and mirrors. Everything is motion. And unless Philly, this isn't the same Philly defense as last year where they were extremely fundamentally sound. This is a Philly defense that's had its moments this year, but they've also had times where they haven't been able to stop the run, and Miami does that really well. I think Philly could be in for a long night, because Miami's going to try and put it on the ground because you don't want to throw against your corners, right? So Miami's going to want to wear down the interior of your defense, and then that's where we hit you, because when you got to stop Mostert, well, then you got to stop the pass too.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think that the Eagles defense is really going to struggle on Sunday. I think that when you look at Tua, he's a guy that really gets the ball out very fast. So I think the one area where we could have an advantage is that we have a really good pass rush. We have really good defensive linemen, but I don't really think it matters because
they get the ball out so quick.
He's gonna get the ball out fast and neutralize that, and then in the secondary you don't really have defensive backs that can neutralize that. So there's only one real way that I think that the Eagles can try to win this game, and it's
number 11.
It's the entire Eagles offense. I think they have to have a great game, a complete game, their best game of the season. And the Eagles have been one of the best teams in time possession. They can possess the ball for a very, very long time, and they can have long sustained drives. So the problem is, as we talked about earlier, the red zone. So against a team like Miami that has this firepower that can answer quickly, even if you do possess the ball a long time, you got to be efficient and effective in the red zone. If you're screwing around and kicking field goals, I think it's going to be a problem. So I feel like the best way we can win this game is we have to try to keep the ball away from that offense and try to limit as many possessions that they can have because they're going to score points. They're going to put up yards. They're going to score points. There's not really anything I think we're going to be able to do on defense to slow that down.
Well, the blueprint for if you take the Buffalo blueprint for beating Miami a couple weeks ago, what they did was they isolated Stephon Diggs on Eli Apple and Kader Kohu, guys that are not meant to cover the number one. And I think if Philly can find the matchup where it's not Xavier Howard, where it's one of the lesser corners, and you could find a way to get him on A.J. Brown all night, I think Philly can really expose that like the Bills did with Stephon Diggs, and that's why the Bills at home with their crowd got ahead, and then the crowd was just too much, and it just kind of became too much for Miami on the road. And I think that's what Philly has to do is go to your number one receiver in A.J. Brown, take advantage of getting him on a slot corner, and just keep pounding that at Miami like the Bills did.
In the last few weeks, the Eagles have really been getting A.J. Brown the ball. He hasn't had a game since the Minnesota game, week 2, in which he had a game below 125 yards. So
and he's
really been consistent.
And he's the first Eagle ever with 4 straight 125-plus yard games. No receiver in Eagles history has ever done that.
AJ's playing great. Lindy, do you have anything to add to anything John or I said?
Oh yeah, I got some recon myself that I can rebuttal with as well, and we'll get into a little bit of them here with the first page. So some things to consider. Miami has had a bit of a defensive struggle. So giving up 48 to the Buffalo Bills, as we just talked about, this is a team that was only able to score 14 points the entire first half, and then only an additional 6 in the second half. And I seen a little bit of what Buffalo did, and watching some film here. I liked that they used mostly 11 and 12 personnel sets to really take advantage of a defense that struggles to stop the run. They're bottom 12 in yards allowed, yards per carry, and the amount of the amount of times that teams run the football on the Dolphins. I think that's going to be their weakest point. They're about average across the board to below average in that, and their pass defense isn't much better either when you consider the fact that Xavier Howard is questionable for this game. Jalen Ramsey just got back to practice from his rehabilitation, and as John mentioned earlier, they just have guys in the secondary that aren't capable of covering number one, or in the fact of the Eagles, number two receiver, and I can throw Dallas Goedert in there as well. But in their other four matchups, they only gave up 21 or fewer points. So they are capable of going both ways here. For the second page, we got to talk about this. The Dolphins are just they're essentially a cheat code this year, because how often do you see a 70 burger put up? That's like a college basketball score, all right, or WNBA,
it's only happened
however you want to call it.
3 times in NFL history, 3 times.
So, I mean, and unfortunately, it happened to Shannon Sharp's Denver Broncos, as we know. But this is a team. This is a team that's averaging 37.3 points per game. Tua is completing 71% of his passes. QBR 75. Those are MVP numbers across the board. And then I got to give it to the O-line that in a span of 6 games, they're only averaging a sack given up, but 4 of those came against the Buffalo Bills. And I think a big part of what Buffalo was able to do, and Tua is the fastest quarterback in getting the ball out of his hands. Statistically this year, he's the fastest in getting the football out. So, there's a couple of things.
Huge problem for the Eagles defense.
There you go. So there's a couple of things working for the Eagles here on both sides of the ball. Number one, and this even dates back to Super Bowl 52 and the amount of other times the Eagles were able to do it in terms of time of possession. The biggest thing when we were watching Super Bowl 52, what were we saying to ourselves? Keep the ball out of Tom Brady's hands and he can't do anything with it. The Eagles have been able to dominate like that, and we've seen it against Tampa Bay this year where, we go into their house, we eliminate them 25-11. Baker Mayfield, he barely had the football that game because they were just getting handled defensively. Of course, against the Dolphins, that's not going to be the case because they're just completely more talented just about across the board. And that's not discounting guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin because they're still very good receivers. But you have a track team and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill who are going to burn you in crossing routes or goes right down the field all day because nobody in the league can keep up with these two. And you put them on the same team. It's almost not fair. So, but in a nutshell, I want to see a little more creativity, like what the Bills were able to do against the Dolphins defense.
So let me stop you there on what the Bills did. Connor Williams did not play. He's a top 3 center in the league. He did not play in that game. Liam Eichenberg played in that game. He's one of the worst linemen in the league. He's awful. If you watch his grade, it was about a 10. 50 is an average. He had about a 10 grade PFF grade in that game against Buffalo. That's not just the Buffalo game. He is that in his career. He's awful. So Connor Williams is questionable to play. If he plays, he's our center. That changes everything because that's where Miami got beat in that game against Buffalo, where you said they gave up 4 sacks. They did not have their second best lineman in that game in Connor Williams. Again, is a top 3 center. So if he does play, that changes everything. It changes the snaps because Eichenberg can't snap the ball worth anything. It also changes the interior where he's able to stop guys like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis because he can handle that. Eichenberg will get run over. He'll trip over his own feet. He's that bad. And you'll just have a field day. So as long as Connor Williams is in, I have no worries about that. The one thing you've avoided this entire time, Lindy, you haven't mentioned Jalen Hurts and how pedestrian he's been all year. 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. You haven't mentioned him at all. You've avoided that. You've talked about us, but you haven't talked about how bad your quarterback has been this entire year. He's skated by because you guys have so much talent on your team. You're a Super Bowl team last year. He's skated by because you guys are 5-1 or whatever. Like, of course he's not getting. If you guys were 3-3, he would be getting flack. But you guys are 5-1, so he's skating by second most interceptions in the league. Come on, man. He's, I believe, 21st in passer rating. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts and how bad he's been, because you're talking about my team giving up 4 sacks and the blueprint. Well, Jalen Hurts, I mean, he's an average quarterback this year. Let's just put it out there. Like, his receivers have saved him. The team has saved him 5-1. And I think Miami's going to expose him a little bit, how bad he's played so far.
I don't know about receivers saving him or anything, but
AJ Brown's done a good job.
He has, but what I can say is the fact that this is what happens, and I think Tua also struggled with this in his first couple of years outside of injury, and this is what happens when you're trying to build a cohesiveness with a first-year offensive coordinator, because Hurts was looking the same in his first year when you had Sirianni and Shane Steichen trying to figure everything out, and I think this is them trying to figure themselves out as a team as a whole, but when you got a quarterback that's going to continue to fight against the ropes, there's nothing really to worry about, for one. 2, Hurts and Tua are in the same boat, at the fact that you have 2 young quarterbacks that are in their mid-20s still, so they have a long way to go in terms of development and MVP caliber play. And
so you said he's still figuring it out, right? Said he's still figuring it out with
between him and Brian Johnson.
But
yes.
you said he'll be all right, right?
Yeah,
You're telling me he's going into a matchup on primetime with the greatest offense we've ever seen, at least through 6 weeks into a season, and he's still figuring it out. That's the answer you're going to give me?
You're talking one side of the football,
then this
though.
Game over. Like, we might as well not even play. If he's still figuring it out,
you're talking one side of the football. It takes 2 sides of the football to win a game
against the Miami Dolphins. If Jalen Hurts doesn't play well, they have no chance. Miami's too good. Too good.
I don't know. Personally, I don't know about that, because as far as
tell me what can beat Miami if Jalen Hurts has a bad game.
So here's the thing. As good as the Dolphins have been offensively, defensively, there's a lot left to be desired. And yes, I understand that you've had some key injuries, but the Eagles have been a lot more. The Eagles have sustained a lot more injuries on top of that. And if we want to add some more context to that, this is the same Bills team. The Bills team you faced is the same team that lost at home to the Jaguars and barely beat the New York Giants by 5.
Well, the Jaguars was actually in London.
You just lost to the Jets. It's irrelevant.
As did the 49ers to the Browns. So the point,
exactly.
The point remains the same. Everyone can have a bad day. So I think for me, the most important part is, and what we're not going to be able to see is 2 teams at full strength, unfortunately. But what we can say is that it's going to be, I already know it's going to be a firefight, for one. So the Eagles can attack this 2 ways. They can either fight fire with fire offensively, or, as they have done for the longest, is that they can put on a sustained drive of at least take 9-10 minutes off the clock, keep the ball out of Tua's hands, speed him up, and not let him get to his first progression. And if he holds on to the ball for more than 2.3 to 2.5 seconds, he's not going to be able to do anything. So, I mean, that's where I'm at with this. I'm not in here saying that it's going to be a full clear, that either one of the teams is going to blow out the other, because they're just too talented for that on both sides of the ball.
I didn't say it. I was just curious.
But, yeah.
I was just curious if Hurts isn't at his 100%, how do you beat us? I just don't.
No, I mean, I think I hate to say that John is correct, but yeah, I think that Jalen Hurts in this game has to have the signature Jalen Hurts game.
Yep.
You know, it's a huge game.
Yeah, he does.
These guys, the biggest storyline of this game is going to be about Tua was the guy that replaced Jalen at Alabama. Like, that's probably what everyone's going to be talking about nonstop. It's probably going to be mentioned on the broadcast like 50 times. So it is a great offense and a great quarterback that he's familiar with. So you have to go out there and perform at the highest level, especially in a primetime game, to show the world that you are that kind of guy. And we know that he's that kind of guy. But, you know, at times this season, no, he hasn't played like he's that type of guy. But
and
we know that he has it in him. So
and I've seen times where, and I've mentioned this earlier in the season, where he's holding onto the ball for 5 seconds, and he threw a nice touchdown to I think it was Zadarius, the guy from Atlanta.
I know which one. Yeah, it was
it
was the throw to Zacchaeus. Yeah,
it was a nice throw.
He's not going to have that every time.
He's not going to have that kind of time against Miami, because Phillips and Van Ginkel will be on him a lot quicker than 5 seconds. I don't know if you guys have any update. Like, is Lane Johnson? Is he going to play?
Lane's expected to play. Yep.
That was what I was curious to. But it won't be 5 seconds standing in the pocket like all day with a throw like that. Miami's pass rush is a lot better than whoever they were playing that day.
All right, guys. So let's just wrap this up here. Score predictions for Sunday night. Lindy, you can go first.
I'm thinking this is probably going to resemble a lot of what we've seen versus the Vikings. It's going to be high scoring. I think right now the Eagles are a 2.5 point favorite at home. But I'm thinking we're going to probably see a score of about 34-28, give or take, maybe an extra touchdown between both teams. But it's going to be very close. There's going to be bright lights there. Sunday Night Football, primetime game. Jalen's built for those kind of moments. It's Kelly Green week. The stars are good. The stars are going to be out. You already know what kind of stage it's going to be for him. So I know that he's going to show up. He's not going to let this team down, and I think they're going to win a hard-fought game.
Okay, John.
I think I'm going to say 31-24 Miami. The over is 52 right now, and the line is 2.5 for Philly right now. So which means Miami's favored by 0.5 point, because you get 3 points for being the home team. So Miami's actually favored in this one. Philly only has the favorite because they're home. So Miami's favored. I think Miami wins 31-24. That's what I think.
As I said, Jalen Hurts got to have a signature Jalen Hurts game. I think he does. I think the offense shows up. 31-28 Eagles. Jake Elliott game winner. That's what I got for you. John, do you have you want to tell anybody about your shows, what you guys are doing, any stuff like that?
For sure. Make sure you check out Sideline Sports. Obviously, you're watching it on here. All the good stuff that we got going on. NFL Alumni Media, our Tuesday show. Blue Hawks 13 for me on Twitter. We got a lot of great stuff going on Sideline Sports. James and Jay, and we have a million other great people, great talent on this network. We're so thankful for all the people in this network. It's the best network in the world, as you said, James, and I'm very thankful to be working with guys like you guys. Just grateful, because this is awesome. Working with like great people who love sports, but also just good dudes, I'm just very grateful.
We're a family, we're a team, all that great stuff. So we will see you guys. Coming up next is the Gauntlet. So we're going to join Jay and all the boys to talk some NFL stuff with you guys. We will see you over there. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Tune into the Linc'd podcast next week as we talk more stuff about the Eagles. See you guys next week.